I believe in getting out there and letting them know that they too can look like me and be in law enforcement and serve their community.
We look at everything that makes us different and we chalk it up as a liability, when in all reality, it's your biggest asset.
Are you ready to have the real conversations?
It's a breath of fresh air in a very suffocating world. So many times we just want to exist as human beings, but because of labels that have been placed on us, meaning, hey, I'm black, or hey, I'm of color, or hey, I'm a minority, it really hinders me just moving forward. By saying this specifically for our community, this is just a mustard seed that I believe can grow into a mighty tree.
The ones that will make you uncomfortable and accountable, but perhaps change this nation?
Part of that awesome responsibility is to make sure that I'm not the only, whenever my tenure is done, that this is a common thing.
My father always said, when the door opens, stick your foot in it, even if it gets trampled, bruised, crushed, keep it there until you achieve whatever opportunity affords you.
Good evening and thank you for joining us for The Conversation. We started this back in 2020 with the goal of having people of color be heard and hoping to see positive changes in our community on the issues of racial injustice and racism.
And during that same time, we've heard the phrase diversity, equity, inclusion, and access quite a lot. And we wondered, where do things stand? What improvements have we seen? A couple of recent steps in terms of representation. The mural, called A Century of Women and the Law, was installed in the Franklin County Courthouse's civic lobby. There was a time not everyone was permitted to govern behind these walls, and it's been 102 years since women were given the right to vote. The new mural depicts 33 women. Some are protesting, some are celebrating. 13 of them are women who have served as justices on Ohio's Supreme Court. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor says it's important to remember women fought for their equality.
Also, changing faces and representation. Republican Representative-elect Josh Williams and Republican Senator-elect Michelle Reynolds both say they're excited to bring a new lens to the Ohio State House. Reynolds says one of her top priorities will be public safety, with a plan to defend the Second Amendment while ensuring every gun owner is responsible. Williams' big focus is the workforce. He wants more Ohioans to have marketable skills to fill open jobs. They both say one top priority is addressing inflation, that while it starts at the federal level, they agree some things can be done at the state level to help ease the price hikes.
I'd like to see us cut more of the personal income tax so that people can afford the groceries and all of the goods that they need to keep their families moving forward and to be prosperous.
See how we can improve our workforce development policies to allow Ohioans that are motivated to gain marketable skills so they can go out into the workforce and apply for some of these jobs.
In 2021, the Columbus Dispatch sent out a survey, an inaugural survey, to Central Ohio organizations on how they implement diversity, equity, and inclusion into their workplaces. NBC4's Caleb Michael spoke with the executive director of the Columbus Dispatch about this year's survey and its results.
We all have additional and more progress to make on this issue when we're talking about true equity.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's an environment companies strive for. The Columbus Dispatch is one of them.
It's a journey. Okay, we're working on that journey ourselves, and we are committed to do exactly the things that we're asking about what other companies are doing.
Edwina Blackwell-Clark is the executive director of the Columbus Dispatch. She's the first woman and person of color in the paper's 150-year history. But it's not new for her.
I've been the first in a couple other previous roles, and that means there's an awesome responsibility. Part of that awesome responsibility is to make sure that I'm not the only, whenever my tenure is done, that this is a common thing.
Part of why she came to the Dispatch was because of the paper's efforts towards diversity.
We're building an inclusive newsroom, that there are many opportunities for everyone, but also particularly for women and people of color.
And their commitment to forward progress.
When council said that racism was a public health issue, we thought that that is something that we need to examine, we need to keep track of, and continue to report on. So I'm really glad that our previous business editor actually thought about this particular survey, that this would be a way to establish a benchmark, and let's keep tracking that.
The question centered around their efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. It found that 81% of responding organizations have a full-time employee dedicated to DEI. About 63% have a 3 to 5 year DEI roadmap. But some trends, they outpaced others.
The broad trend is that we saw some improvement in terms of women, but that same level of improvement wasn't there for people of color.
For instance, 49% of C-suite executives are women, while only 21% of these spaces are ethnically diverse. That number is down from 32% in the year just prior. Stephanie Hightower with the Columbus Urban League says many times Black professionals are not aware of these openings or how to prepare for them.
We've got to make sure that people are ready to walk in, and if they're not ready, that we give them the supports. There are many times when you might walk and get promoted to a position and you give people the support that they need so that they can be successful.
Blackwell Clark says these results show efforts are evolving, and more than that, the dispatch is holding themselves accountable.
How are you continuing to push the envelope in those hiring practices within dispatch?
For the last 2 years or so, we have published our numbers. We have specifically published our numbers so people can see how we are tracking on women and people of color in the overall newsroom and also in the leadership and management ranks. People can see our progress there, or they can see if there's lack thereof progress. People can see that.
The numbers, they speak for themselves. The dispatch had no Black people in leadership roles in 2021, but this year, 10% of their leadership is Black. It also saw an increase in Hispanic, Latino people and women in both leadership roles and in the newsroom.
Do you believe unique perspectives improve the way in which you can tell stories?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The newspaper's got to reflect the community. We've got to reflect the people. We've got to reflect the issues. We have to celebrate those things when we've got great accomplishments that's happening, but we've got to also make sure that we're telling the story of the underserved and what are those issues that as a community, as a safety net in this community, we need to come together to fix.
It's about giving opportunities and a voice to those who often are not heard.
I couldn't have done what I've done in the past, and I couldn't be here in this position right now if I didn't have people who believed in me and who gave me opportunities and who coached me so that I could grow and I could be ready for a position like this.
So that they're ready when their chance comes.
You got to open the door. You've got to train. You've got to prepare all individuals so that when the opportunity comes, you can walk through and engage.
The survey was sent to some 2,000 businesses, but what was interesting is only 31 businesses responded. Now, there were sizes from about 5 to 5,000 employees in those organizations, but then the big question is, why was there such a little response? And it was more than last year, but it's only about 1.5% of businesses responding.
Interesting. That is interesting, only because this is such an effort made by so many businesses. I'm sure they would love to tout their efforts if they are making them, but we're not sure if they are they?
Yeah.
We're not. But what I did really appreciate is Dispatch. They published their numbers. They're showing how they are incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm all about walking the walk, talking the talk. So for me, that speaks a lot and very highly of Edwina Blackwell Clark, the environment that she is cultivating at Dispatch. So I think it's good things from them for sure.
Yeah, and it's always so interesting that we talk about the fact that this is 2022 and we're just now really seeing this big emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion in big businesses that are out there that people know very well. So even though we have made a lot of progress, there's still a lot of work to be done. And clearly, if we're not hearing a lot of responses, there's still some effort that needs to be made.
Exactly, and I think that was the big thing that Edwina Blackwell Clark was pushing was this is a process. It's not something that's happening overnight, but they're continuing to be an example for the community, and the hope is that next year's survey, when they continue to do it, there will be more than 31 responses.
Yeah.
It's so interesting too, because so many of these businesses, all the consumers are of all different colors and genders, and you need to have people in the room to know how to cater to those consumers, right?
Exactly.
And this is something that I know they're all struggling with, but sometimes it takes that light bulb moment, like, you know what? We look around the room and we're not all represented here, are we?
Yeah.
Nah, and uncomfortable situations breed diversity. They breed forward progress. So I think that is the goal that we all want to get to eventually.
Yeah, it's a fascinating study, and I can't wait to hopefully see more responses next time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Speaking of business, according to a study by LendingTree, despite 16% of the Columbus population being Black, only 4% of the small businesses are Black owned. Now, part of the reason for that is a lack of access to credit and capital, something that goes back decades. But that is going to change very soon. For the past 10 years, Lynette Smith has been serving up barbecue with her Mallory's Rollin' Rib Shack.
Started with my father and mother over 50 years ago. So we have all the secret recipes for the mac and cheese, the greens, the brisket, you name it.
Meanwhile, Michael Hardgrove runs Dad's Enterprises, which helps empower families through fatherhood development.
Think of us like a Johnson & Johnson, right? You think Johnson & Johnson, you think baby powder. So with Dads, think of us in the same vein as a corporation. We create programs, products, or services that help fathers create the best possible parenting environment.
On this Friday in December, Lynette and Michael are at an info session for Freedom Equity, Inc., a new venture that soon will help businesses like theirs that have been historically left behind or forgotten.
Freedom Equity is a new community development financial institution, or CDFI, that's here to provide microloans to small Black-owned businesses in Franklin County and Central Ohio. We saw what was happening in our businesses during the Paycheck Protection Program and during COVID, that they're underbanked and under-resourced and didn't have access to the capital they needed to grow and sustain their businesses.
It's the first of its kind in Columbus, and for the entrepreneurs in this room, it's much needed.
Because everyone will be able to have a chance. They won't have to go into a bank and be turned down or wait, a waiting period. Been there, done that. And for 10 years, it hasn't been easy. It's been a struggle, a journey.
It's a breath of fresh air in a very suffocating world. So many times we just want to exist as human beings, but because of labels that have been placed on us, meaning, hey, I'm Black, or hey, I'm of color, or hey, I'm a minority, it really hinders me just moving forward.
We're seeing businesses who are totally great candidates, bankable, everything, but we'll hand them off in some cases and they wouldn't receive the financing because of maybe they're a startup, maybe their credit score was considered too low, maybe they had something in their background that prohibited them from receiving funding. And so we don't have those same barriers as a private nonprofit. We can set up our own standards. Our credit score limits are not really limits, they're just like, they're helping us underwrite and to see what's going on, but not like they're not the end all be all.
The maximum loan is $50,000 at 5% interest for 5 years. For startups, it's a smaller amount. Relationship managers will work with the business through the life of the loan, cultivating a personal relationship. The ultimate goal of all of this, creating an inclusive economy where Black entrepreneurs thrive.
It literally blows my mind all the time. I've been in this work for probably about 15 years. Working with the Black and minority business community generally. But specifically to be in this kind of position where we can change so many lives really quickly, like the impact that we'll be able to have with these loans, I think it'll really start sinking in once we are cutting checks, right?
By saying this specifically for our community, who has historically been disenfranchised, disadvantaged, not by choice, but by circumstance, this is just a mustard seed that I believe can grow into a mighty tree.
And let me tell you, Jen, I was at that info session last week and hearing the stories of all these entrepreneurs and their dreams of what they want their businesses to be or what they already have been and just need more capital to grow their business. This is how you know this is important. This is going to make a difference once they start cutting those checks, because this is just a lack of access that they just never had this before, just the difficulty in getting it.
And I think a lot of times that's a roadblock for people, right? They have the ideas, they have the creativity, they have the energy, the enthusiasm, but it's the funding.
Not the money.
And they don't know where to turn for resources. So having somebody say, I can give you that jump start, I think that's going to help not only our community, but our race as a whole. I think the fact that people can say, I can do it, there's nothing to stop me, there's no excuse, it's going to be a big boost.
And it's so important too, because whether it's just 10K or 50K, whatever it can just get those people going. And then it's that business coaching as well, because sometimes, as she was mentioning to me about the PPP, and people didn't know how to get the paperwork to get the money from the PPP. That's an issue. So now you have people that are willing to work with you, will answer your phone calls, because some of these major banks weren't answering their phone calls because they didn't have a personal relationship. All this is going to play a role in how you can see these Black businesses, these small businesses really begin to grow again.
And what you said about support, the fact that you have somebody behind you, not just handing you the money, but giving you that information, the resources, helping you through that journey. that's not something you can find in a lot of places. So knowing that someone was going to answer your phone call and help you through it
huge.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, the applications, the pre-applications are out. The applications are out. You can go to freedomequity.org, and that's where you can find more information. If you are one of those entrepreneurs in Central Ohio that's, you know what, I have a great idea and I need some help, they're the ones who are going to help you, which is wonderful. The Franklin County Sheriff's Office, they welcomed a new chief deputy to the team just last month.
Marvin Hill was sworn in as the new chief deputy of Recruitment, Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion.
And Ann Hoffman spoke with him about the goals for this position.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Chief Deputy Marvin Hill is starting his new role with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office.
Right now, today.
His job will be to recruit new deputies with a focus on diversity, equality, and inclusion. He says his goal is to get his team out into the community, especially those that are underserved.
I believe in the community policing aspect of it. I believe in procedural justice. I believe in getting out there and letting them know that they too can look like me and be in law enforcement and serve their community. And I want to get to those young people. So I want to get into the middle schools, the high schools, get into some of these community groups, the Urban League, the NAACP.
Hill says his job is about building relationships and showing young people they can have a long career in law enforcement. Hill formerly served with the Ohio State Highway Patrol in multiple roles. One of those also involved recruitment.
He's got that just outgoing, dynamic personality, and he's just eager to do the job.
Sheriff Dallas Baldwin says they have been working to fill this position for almost a year. He says recruiting has become more difficult in recent years, and with that, internal changes need to be made. Baldwin says he believes this position is necessary for the department's future.
I think it's our responsibility. You know, this sheriff's office and any governmental agency within a community has to answer to the community, and I think they need to be made up of that community.
And Matt, this is just step one, and right now the Franklin County Sheriff's Office is working on building a team for Chief Deputy Hill.
This is such an important effort for so many police departments and sheriff's offices all across the country, but for Chief Deputy Hill, I can just feel how important this is for him. The enthusiasm oozing out of him, wasn't it?
Right, he was so energetic and ready to go and hit the ground running. His main priority is getting the kids in the schools and helping them to build up and trust them and hopefully be deputies like him one day.
That'd be really cool. Thank you very much, Ann. That's a great story.
Ensuring that local law enforcement agencies reflect the people and the communities they serve. It's not just a goal, but an effort led by the state of Ohio to put more minority and female officers in police departments statewide. I spoke with the woman leading the charge about why diversity in these departments matters.
Take a moment to picture a police officer. What do you see?
I always pictured law enforcement as superheroes in uniforms.
Sarah Shendy came to the U.S. from Egypt when she was just 6 years old.
Growing up in a Middle Eastern Muslim household, compassion and empathy are foundational.
And Shendy says she's built her career as a police officer on that foundation. She's worked for the Copley Township Police Department near Akron for 14 years, but more recently was named director of the Office of Law Enforcement Recruitment. Governor Mike DeWine established the office in 2020, putting an emphasis on creating more diversity within law enforcement agencies, something Shendy, a woman of color, believes to be essential.
It's so great that I'm in the position that I am now with the state because representation matters.
But the representation of women and minorities in American law enforcement is less than 13%, according to the National Institute of Justice. There's little research to explore why this underrepresentation persists, but the state is working to eliminate any financial barriers, making grant money available to Ohio's 900-plus police departments to recruit and hire more women and minorities as officers, two groups that Shendy says are skeptical to apply because of fears over stereotypes or discrimination.
They and we, because I did the same thing, we look at everything that makes us different and we chalk it up as a liability when in all reality it's your biggest asset.
Because, Shendy says, officers who can bring a diverse perspective to departments.
The fact that you speak a different language, the fact that you have cultural knowledge, the fact that you have religious knowledge.
Only increases a force's collective ability to protect and serve. Unfortunately, Shendy says, departments are struggling to attract and keep diverse applicants because of several high-profile, often negative interactions between police officers and people of color.
We are walking billboards. Every single officer in the country is a walking billboard, especially the first line responders. How we act really speaks volume, and your actions could be the reason why you plant the seed for someone to want to become a police officer, or your actions could do the exact opposite, and you can give them every reason in the world to go find a job elsewhere.
And because of misconceptions about day-to-day policing.
People, especially women and minorities, are very uneducated when it comes to understanding what we do as police officers. I would say that 80% of the time we're mediators, we're counselors, we're parents, we're teachers.
And Shendy says people are more willing to listen when they feel both seen and heard.
I said in the beginning that representation matters, and I always use the phrase, people don't believe the message until they believe the messenger.
And it was so inspiring talking to Officer Shendy, not only because she mentioned the work that she put in physically, obviously, to be a law enforcement officer, but the fact that she mentioned compassion, empathy. Those are the qualities that they're really looking for in order to reach these diverse communities, because people are, as she said, more willing to listen if they hear it from somebody that looks and sounds like them.
And, I remember talking to police officers maybe 2 years ago. Time flies now.
Yeah.
It was right after George Floyd, and talking to Columbus police officers, and they were saying the same thing. They said they just need to see us in the community. We need to talk to them, and it helps the relationship.
Yeah.
But in terms of being an officer, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, when you already can just connect with them on that level, it's going to make their job easier. It's going to make the relationship a lot better.
And just knowing that they have the support of the state. Shendy mentioned that she was grateful that the governor even saw the need 2 years ago to implement this program, and then to give them funding so they can't use money as an excuse. We're eliminating financial barriers. Do whatever you need to do in order to put these officers in these departments.
I mean, we talk about there are so many ways to lower the crime rate. There's one way to do it, getting more cops on the streets, and then actually having them connect with the community, get to know the citizens in those neighborhoods. That's only going to help everyone get along better and hopefully lower the crime rates everywhere.
Yeah, it is vital, and I love to see the effort that they're putting into this. Few people of any race or gender can match the achievements of Ann B. Walker. From her 1949 newspaper column, A Woman's Point of View, through her history-making career, some right here in the hallways of NBC4, she's blended social concerns and issues with journalism, allowing for deep connections through the community. Last month, Ann celebrated her 99th birthday, a milestone for sure. And a few years ago, our Mike Jackson sat down with Ann. He spoke with her. Tonight, you are going to hear my voice in this story, but these are the words of Mike and this incredible trailblazer.
And I said, okay, well, let's call it one woman's opinion. That's what it is. And the general manager, he was so afraid, he wanted me to do this, but then he was so afraid of being sued. And what I never told him was that I took every editorial to a lawyer friend and said, can we get sued or can I get sued?
Walker and her opinions took her community by storm. She started reporting and was the first woman to cover the Ohio legislature, the first in Columbus to interview Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Ann worked at VKO from 1962 to 1967, named assistant news director. But
I said, well, why can't I be the news director? I'm doing the work. And they said, well, you don't have women as news directors. No, there is no woman as a news director in the country. And they bring in these disc jockeys, and they want me to train them to be a news director.
Then in 1967, Maury Butler, the director of community service at Channel 4, asked her to become his assistant community director.
I was the first woman in management in Columbus. They didn't have women on television. They had women on radio. There were women on radio, none on television. So here I am in a management position.
She taught herself the business and made history again, going on air, taking over a program called Focus on Columbus. But making history is not easy.
Certain sections of Columbus were sundown. And they just did not accept blacks. Things were said, things were done, and just petty, mean, vicious things, only because my skin is brown or only because I'm female, plus my skin is brown.
But she smiled and she persisted. At 99, she is still active in church, political, and social arenas.
And my father always said, when the door opens, stick your foot in it, even if it gets trampled, bruised, crushed, keep it there until you achieve whatever opportunity affords you.
And, reading the words that Mike, put together, that conversation that he had with Ann, the fact that she celebrated 99 years, which that in and of itself is incredible. But looking back at her career, I don't think women like me, like I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for someone like Ann Walker. So the opportunities that she created, allowing us to have a voice, to be able to be a voice for others in the community, I know I'm really grateful for that.
And you talk about being a voice for others. We think of our good friend Mike, who obviously has put his words on so many great stories and helping so many of our citizens right here in Columbus with many of their problems. We're thinking about him as we approach this holiday season, and our good friend Bob Nunnally, who's going through his own battle. So we ask that you do the same. Give your thoughts and prayers to them as we all head into this holiday season with all these wonderful thanks that we have for all the blessings in our life.
Yeah, we would definitely want to uplift them, but of course their families and their friends too. Obviously, it's hard to take care of someone. It's tough on their families, so they need support too, but just remembering the great things that they've done in this community, so this is our way of saying thanks, letting them know that we're thinking about them, we care about them, and we're wishing the absolute best for them.
100%. The last thing we want to leave you with is help us continue this conversation. What are you talking about in your house, in your workplace, at your church, whatever it might be? Let us know. Send your thoughts, your discussions, write to us, and we will absolutely take that into account.
Yeah, and of course, you can see our past conversations too on NBC4i.com, what we've talked about through the last year, the last couple of years. So much has transpired. So again, let us know what you think, what you want to talk about in 2023. I'm sure there's still a lot more conversations to be had.
For sure. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.